Hello, and welcome to this episode of Real Life and Other Fantasies. I'm your host, Melvin E. Edwards, and I'm pleased to be joined on today's storytelling journey by Melissa Amour, a writer and public policy advocate who has worked on projects for PBS, the National Endowment for the Humanities, Fortune Magazine, and Action for Healthy Kids. Good morning, Melissa. Just curious, how's
Good
the weather over
morning,
there on the
Melvin.
East Coast?
It's actually very nice. It's chilly. It's cold. As you can see, I'm bundled up, but it's lovely out. I'm looking out my window right now at the sunshine, so that's good.
So, what's the temperature, just to give us an idea?
Oh, I'm thinking low 50s. I'm guessing. I haven't actually checked, but that's
Okay.
that's about where we're at right now.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
actually about what it is here. I'm in South Texas and it's in the 50s today, so it's very cold for
Oh,
us
okay.
this time of the year.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm a summer girl all the way. So for me, like low 50s, I'm like already
Yeah, it's
freezing. So
chilly.
it's only going to get worse from here.
Absolutely, you'll be getting snow by Saturday. So,
Yeah. God help us.
so it seems like I've talked to a lot of writers on recent episodes of the show. I think that's probably because I'm also a writer, and so we sort of naturally gravitate towards each other. We tend to be introverted,
Yes.
and it sort of goes that way. But writing is a creative endeavor, and even though we might be talking about the same subject, every writer is different. Every subject is different, so no two writers are the same. So I want to explore what makes Melissa Quinn Amour unique. So
Oh,
here, so
wow.
we that's going to be our focus today. So let's talk about your writing. Did you start writing
Okay.
early in life, and what was your motivation to begin?
I did. I started super early. I started reading and writing very early, before I started school and writing little books. And I have to say, probably my biggest inspiration was my grandmother. She was a storyteller herself. Not, I mean, she dropped out of school in the eighth grade. She was not, book smart, as she would have said. But my goodness, could she tell a story? And she was sort of the family historian, and I just latched onto that. I loved it. Still to this day, love all of that, the ancestry stuff and everything. And I began by writing her stories down, from of the family. And I think I was probably a little inspired by, I was as a little girl, as many little girls in the 70s and 80s, we were very involved in Little House on the Prairie. We love the series by Laura Ingalls Wilder. And so for me, it was kind of my way of doing what she did, was to write down my family's stories. And so and illustrate them and all of that. So I have to say it was my grandmother, my Hungarian grandmother, which was we have sort of three branches of the family. My father's um, side, they were Irish immigrants. And then on my mother's side, we had sort of two. My grandfather, his ancestors came over with William Penn in like 1682. So they had settled
Wow.
in the Philadelphia Bucks County area in Pennsylvania, centuries ago. And then, but then my grandmother, her parents were immigrants from Hungary. So she was the different one in the family because everybody else was sort of this Irish English background. And I was fascinated by her. She had a huge personality and told great stories. And yeah, so I have to say she was my inspiration at a very young age to start writing.
Okay, so you were in the education field for quite a while, and you came back around to writing. So what motivated that transition?
So what happened with me was when I went to school originally, I went to TCNJ, the college in New Jersey, which back then was called Trent State College. Go Lions! And I was the first in my family at that time to go to college, and I initially went into English education, and that was my plan, was to be a teacher. And I about halfway through, I decided, I don't really want to teach. I really want to write. And when I informed my father of this, he was not pleased because in his mind, he saw teaching as a very steady, solid career path, whereas writing to him, I think, seemed very, it just didn't seem like something that would always have a path forward, for me, or just to make a living. So I think we sort of split the difference a little bit. And so I ended up going into writing for education So I worked with different nonprofits, corporate foundations, and things like that to write curriculum and to um, you know, basically help market what they were doing as well. But mostly I was writing for the education world. Um, and then, of course, I had my daughter, and I had gone sort of part time and was freelancing. And then I did go into working in schools for a while. And I always say to everybody, I did literally everything except teaching. I was never a classroom teacher, which is interesting considering that's where I originally started out. But I was doing advancement type work in the administration, which is alumni relations, communications, which was a big part of it, admissions, like that sort of stuff, and raising money, fundraising. So I did get really into that side of things. I got really into the development stuff. And I thought, oh, this is really cool. I really enjoy this. This is kind of a good niche. But then 2016 happened and Trump happened. And, I was finding myself on Twitter all the time, like you. I think that's how we all kind of
Hmm.
met. And I found myself just so, uh, what is the word? Flabbergasted in the beginning, just like couldn't believe that this was all happening. And this is going back to 2015, 2016, and just like, oh my goodness, how could this be real? Like it just can't be real. And then, of course, it happened. Trump was elected, and about halfway through his administration, I was like, this was late 2018 at this point. I was like, you know what? I feel like I'm being drawn to use my writing to do something good for the country. I mean, it's the only skill I have. So, like, what can I do? Right. So I decided to quit my job without having another job, knowing what I was going to do, and just try to figure it out. And God bless my husband because he was okay with this. So I quit working where I was at a school at that time, which was a great place. I loved it, but I felt like I needed to do this something different. And I put out on Twitter, hey, I have over 20 years in comms, like looking for a job, let me know. 5-10 minutes later, I get a DM from, I'm sure, I hope he doesn't mind me using his name, Mike Ongstadt, who at the time was working for Evan McMullen at Stand Up Republic. And he said, hey, we're looking for writers, send me your resume. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool, right? So I did. I sent him my resume. I'm like, okay. Next thing I know, I have an invitation down to Washington, D.C. So I'm like, wow, this is exciting, right? So I go down and I interview with all the folks at Stand Up Republic, including Evan. And within a couple weeks, I had a new job. I was working in this political sphere. And it was super exciting. So we got to launch. It's a Substack now, but at the time it was on MailChimp, a newsletter called The Top Line. And it became pretty successful. People were reading what I was writing. It was very exciting. And that sort of ended in May. So it went on for 4 years. But it actually has just gotten picked up again. So we're actually going to be reviving The Top Line, which I'm very excited about. But yeah, so that's kind of like how I got back into writing was, I mean, I hate to say it was because of Trump, but it really was in a strange way. So, and yeah, that's kind of how but I mean, I don't do a lot of creative writing. I wish I did, because that's really what I wish I were writing about. I wish I were writing those family stories again. I'd rather be writing about that than the fall of democracy in the
Well, you
United
gotta
States or
you
the
gotta come
potential
back
fall.
around to that. You've got time to do that.
I do.
So
I
I
do.
want to ask a question. You mentioned Substack. I know a lot of people don't know what Substack is. Can you explain to the listeners what that is?
Sure. Yeah, yeah. So Substack is a platform for writers of all kinds to have a regular newsletter with an audience that reads it, and people write about all sorts of things. Um, the top line, the one that I was working on, was about issues related to democracy, right? Rule of law, global democracy, the health of global democracy, elections, election reform, that sort of thing. But for other people, it might be about sewing. It might be about, it could be about anything. So it's kind of fascinating, and any person can have a Substack newsletter alongside, a lot of really famous writers have their own, obviously have huge audiences, but so I'm a big fan of Substack. I love it. I've actually started a few Substacks for different organizations, and it's going pretty well. So yeah,
So
I'm a
it
proponent.
sounds not altogether different from podcast. Not verbal, not audible, but sort of the same kind of
Yeah,
concept.
it is the same kind of concept, and it kind of goes back to this sort of democratization of content. You know, uh, when we were growing up, it was always that there were editors, gatekeepers for all kinds of content, and now it's not so much like that. To both, and there's been both positives and negatives, obviously, to
Hmm.
that. But in some cases more negative when it comes to social media. I don't think so much with Substack. That's sort of a different type of thing. But yeah, I mean, like it is an opportunity for people to put their writing out there that may not have had either the opportunities to do it, or um, just it's something that they have a niche interest and they want to reach out to other people that have that same interest. So I think it's a pretty cool site.
Okay, that sounds awesome. So I've up to this point, I've always tried to be nonpartisan, even non-political on this show. But you talked about Evan McMullen and politics a little bit. So I'm just curious, have you ever thought about running for office yourself?
Oh, you know what? It's funny, Melvin. I would be terrified to do it. At heart, I am a fraidy cat. And at heart, I am just this, I'm just still this girl from the Philly suburbs that's like, it's interesting because I work with a lot of amazing people. I mean, I sometimes have to pinch myself because I've gotten to meet some really cool people through um, this work that I've done for the last 5 years, and they have amazing lives and they do amazing things. And then there's just me just writing for them. and I, I think that in some other time and place, I may have done that. I would have considered that because I don't know if I'm naive or just whatever, but I do feel like I would love to be able to serve the country in that way. But in the way the environment is now, I don't know that I could. And I think that's kind of sad in a way because
It is.
I don't want to be that person. I want the courage to do it, but at the same time,
Yeah,
I don't know. But who
we live
knows?
in a different time, and
We
my wife
do.
has tried to talk me into running for office for a while, and
Yeah.
I've said multiple times I don't want to do it because I would want to protect you, meaning her,
Yes.
and
Yes.
the idea
Yes.
of having strangers attack my family because of something they disagree with me about is something I just
Exactly.
don't think I could tolerate.
Exactly. Exactly. And I feel the same as you, Melvin. My family comes first. And I've seen what the people I work with who are public figures, I see what they have gone through, some of the things that it's not even publicized, that threats and things. And I just I wish I had a little bit more courage, but at least in this stage of life, I'm not there. We'll see. I mean, if things can change, if we get to a better environment someday, who knows, right? I never would have expected I would be doing this work that I'm doing now. So you never know.
Yeah, the dichotomy or the dilemma, I guess is a better word, is do we wait until the environment's better to do it, or do we do it and help change the environment to make it
Make
better?
the environment better. Yeah, no, you're 100% right. Um, and I'm glad that people who have that have the guts to do that and also have that calling, let's say, are out there doing it. I mean, we have seen a lot of really great people enter into the political system as a result of this kind of broken, dysfunctional place where we're at. And I'm behind them all the way and rooting them on. I'm not sure that I'm ready to be that person
Yeah,
I'll be the one in the background helping you out.
yeah, I agree. Maybe someday we'll both be in office somewhere
Who
and
knows? Who
motivating
knows?
each
That would
other,
be neat.
motivating a few other people on our Twitter X
In our
atmosphere.
little, yeah. Yes. Yeah, agreed. I think a lot of people would be wonderful
Yeah, I agree.
from that group.
I agree.
Yeah.
All right, so a little bit of a switch here. So I'm
Okay.
going to use you as a guinea pig here, if you don't mind. So the
Okay.
title of this podcast is Real Life and Other Fantasies. So starting with this episode, I want to begin a feature called "What's the real life event that happened to you that may seem the most unbelievable if you hadn't experienced it yourself?" So in other words, what type of real life situation have you experienced that would seem like a fantasy? What's happened to you that you think would be hard for somebody else to believe?
Okay. So I had to like go way back in time for this one, about 40 years back. So when I was, and you're from Texas, so this might be like totally ho hum for you, but it was really something for around here. So when I was 11, every year when I was a kid, like a lot of people from the Philadelphia area, you go to the Jersey Shore for your summer vacation. That's what you do, right? And by the way, I should just add right here that like please don't let the MTV version of the Jersey Shore influence what you think of the entire Jersey Shore. That's one little tiny hamlet of the Jersey Shore. So we did not go there. We went to a beautiful place called Long Beach Island every year, and so the one year we were down there and it was the middle of July and we were down there with friends, and in the evening you would go out and you would go play miniature golf or do things you do at the shore, go to the arcade, whatever. And friends of ours had gone down to sort of like there's like a mall on the island, and they said, oh my goodness, it was raining out, it was just not a good night, so we were kind of like, we're just going to stay home and play cards, whatever. So they did go out, but they went to the mall and they said, oh my gosh, it's flooding, it's crazy, we can't get back to the house right now. They
Well,
were calling from a payphone because of course we had no cell phones back then. And we were like, oh wow, really? So we're like, okay, well, they're going to stay out for a while, good thing we didn't go out, glad we stayed here. So I'm just looking out the window watching. I'm looking out the window now, like imitating it. But I was looking out the window watching all the lightning. And I mean, the lightning was constant, constant. Like I've never seen so much lightning in my life. I was like, what is up with this storm? So I'm looking out, and then all of a sudden the lightning lights up the sky, and I see this perfect funnel cloud.
whoa.
Now, we're at the Jersey Shore, right? Okay, so I'm like, no, there's no way that I just saw that. And then the lightning again, funnel cloud. So I go nuts. I start like screaming, and I'm like, there's a tornado coming. There's a tornado coming. My parents are like, Melissa, there's not a tornado. Okay. It's just a bad storm. Everything's fine. I'm like, no, I swear there's a tornado. So my mom's like, okay, if it'll make you feel better, why don't you go in the tub in the bathroom and just sit in there, because you're supposed to be, if you sit in the tub, it's safe if there's a tornado. Eventually the storm ends. The friends come back and we're like, wow, what a wild, crazy night it was. And that was that. We went to bed and it was the next day. So next day dawns, beautiful day. And my father had gone down to the little store at the end of the block to get, I don't know, probably cigarettes. I hate to say it, but that's probably what he was there to get because all the dads smoked back then. So he went down to get stuff from the store, and he comes back and he's like kind of white. He's like, Melissa, he was like, you were right. He said, for one thing, the roof is off the store at the
Whoa.
end of the block. And he said, there really was a tornado. And I was like, thank you. I said, you were all making fun
Told
of me.
you.
You thought
Told you.
I was nuts. Turns out it was an F3, which is like unheard of in that part of
Wow.
Jersey, right? I mean, we get little tornadoes around these parts. You'll get an F0, F1. To have an F3 in Jersey by the shore is kind of strange. So that's my kind of unbelievable story, because it's like, what? How is that possible? Like, how did you have a storm like of that magnitude? That storm that night was the same storm that hit, if you're familiar, I know you'll know this, but I don't know if everybody knows this. When Diana Ross famously did a Central Park concert many
Hmm.
years ago in New York City, and it was just pouring rain, and it was, it's kind
Yes.
of famous, right? Iconic. That was the same night. So it was that same storm made its way up to New York after it
Wow.
hit Jersey.
Well, I actually have a tornado story from that part of the country that happened to me
Do you?
in
Okay.
2000. I, for some whatever reason, my former wife and our kids, when they were very young, who had 4 children, the youngest was less than a year old at the time. We drove from
Okay.
Texas to New Hampshire
Oh,
with
wow.
4 kids, if you can imagine that minivan.
Vacation.
And we stopped for a night in somewhere in the New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania
Oh,
area.
Delaware. Okay.
So it
Okay.
was Newark, Delaware, I think is where it was.
Delaware gets weather. Yeah, they get weather.
And we're in the hotel and the storm comes through and I'm thinking, this is tornado weather. Like I know what tornado weather looks like. I'm thinking, this is tornado
Right.
weather.
Right.
And it was a tornado. And it wasn't far from our hotel. And I
Wow.
was thinking, we drove all the way from Texas and we're gonna die in a tornado in Delaware.
That's
But
crazy.
thankfully we
No,
didn't die.
thank goodness. Yes, yes, I kind of figured. But yeah, no, Delaware, they get some heavy weather there for whatever reason. I don't know why. Like I'm not sure why that state gets hit particularly hard,
Yeah.
but they do. So,
Yeah,
wow, oh my
I'm a
goodness.
weather nerd, and when you were telling this story and talking about all the lightning, I thought, well, there are just 2 indicators of tornadic probability. I'm a weather nerd. I actually have a certification
No, that's
as
cool.
a
I like
weather
it.
spotter, if you can believe that.
Do you?
And
No, I think that's
that constant
fascinating.
lightning like that or large hail, those are the 2 things that you look
Oh,
for first. So if you start to see those
hail for
things,
sure.
you need to take shelter.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
I'm glad you were okay, and maybe next time they'll believe you when you see a perfectly formed funnel cloud heading your direction, and they'll all get in the bathtub with you.
Exactly.
All right, so
It's like,
you're
no one
Philadelphia.
would believe me.
What's that?
I said, why won't anyone believe
Yeah,
me? But
exactly.
I can understand why they didn't because I was a very fearful child, same as a
Yeah,
fearful
you
adult.
were a
And
child,
so
and it was Philadelphia area, and not a normal occurrence, which is why you're on this podcast
that's
right now
exactly
telling
right.
this story. Is your real life
That's exactly
hard
right.
to believe story. So since you are a
Exactly.
native of the Philadelphia area, obviously most people who follow sports, they hear Philadelphia, and the reputation of Philadelphia fans comes up. So tell us what it's like being a Philly fan, and do you get tired of hearing how the whole country thinks you throw snowballs at Santa Claus just because some Philly fans threw snowballs at Santa Claus a long time ago?
I know. It's funny because when people bring up that story and I say, look, I'm 51 and that happened before I was even born, they're shocked by that. They have this sense that it just happened 10 years ago or it just happened 15 years ago. It's like, no, it happened in the late 60s. And most of the people who were there are probably really old or not with us anymore. And I could get into the whole thing with that the guy was drunk and all the stories that are behind it, but I don't because I'm like, what is the point? That's silly. I get where our reputation comes from as Philadelphia fans. We're very, very passionate
Yes, that's the word you
about our
used.
sports. That we're
That's a good
very,
PR word.
very passionate. I But I also think, well, see, for me, I'm mainly a Phillies fan. There is a difference, in my opinion, between Phillies fans and Eagles fans.
Do you say it like a
Eagles fans are a
Philadelphian would
whole
say?
other.
Do you say Eagles?
I say Eagles. I know a lot of Philadelphians say Eagles. Yeah, yeah. No, I don't, and that's because I'm mostly a Phillies fan. No, and I love the Eagles. Don't get me wrong. I root for all of our teams, but I'm like you. I'm a baseball person. So for me, the Phillies are number one, and the Phillies. And that's nothing against Eagles fans, but the Eagles fans are on a whole other level. They're just like, wow, woo, intense. Phillies fans, we like love our Phillies, don't get me wrong. And I'm not saying that, there's not some overly passionate Phillies fans, but I think it is a little bit of a different atmosphere, generally speaking. But yeah, of course of course it hurts sometimes because you're kind of like, oh, come on, we're not all like that. And, and I'm always saying, well, what about when these fans did this or these fans did that? And it's like, it doesn't get the same amount of attention. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to lie. Sometimes, I mean, I think we've earned our reputation, but at other times, I think it's a little overblown. And especially the Santa Claus thing. That drives me nuts because I'm like, dude, come on, man.
That one stuck. That one stuck with you,
It
and,
sure
and it'll,
did,
it'll
didn't
it'll
it?
probably be there forever. So I know you
I
know a little
know.
bit about the story because we talked online before about this. But my first time going to a game in Philadelphia, I moved from my family moved from Texas to Maryland in 2002. So in
Okay.
2003, I went to a game to watch the Astros play. Houston, my home team, and went to a game with my daughter, who was 12 at the time. I wore a cowboy hat and an Astros shirt, and she was sitting next to me. And I
Okay.
made a sign, and I was sitting on the front row of my section. I put the sign up on the rail. It said something like "Astros fans wherever we go" or something like that.
Okay.
And this guy came up. He obviously had some alcohol.
Drinks.
He came up
Yeah.
and looked at my sign, and then he looked up at me. I was a couple feet above the sign. Looked at the sign, looked at me. He did it like back and forth about 3 or 4 times, and I just stood there and watched him. My daughter was completely oblivious to this. I was watching her to make sure she wasn't scared. She
Yeah.
was oblivious, so I just watched him, and I could tell what he was doing. He was trying to decide if it was worth it for him to fight me,
Oh my
and
goodness.
I think the cowboy hat scared him away. I and in my mind, I think he thought this guy's from Texas and all Texans have guns, so he's probably got a gun. So I'm not going to fight him. That's what I'm convinced he thought.
That's possible.
Because finally,
That's
after
possible.
looking back and forth, he just said, "No, it's not worth it." He's actually said that part out loud, and then he walked away. It was
Wow.
crazy. That
I
so,
got a story for you. I got a story for you that happened at Citizens Bank Park. So my daughter is a sports writer. She's an adult. She's grown up now. She's not my little girl anymore. Well, she'll always be my little girl, but she's a grown up now. She's a sports writer and an editor. So she's been into the Philly sports since she was born, basically. So we had her at a game years ago. It was a Phillies game at Citizens Bank Park, and they were playing the Mets. So whenever we play the Mets, a lot of New York fans come down. So where we were sitting, we had a whole row or two of Mets fans. They probably came down in a caravan or something, and they were all kind of together. Um, Let me tell you, they were rough. Some of the stuff they were saying, my husband was ready to like throw down, because our daughter was little, and the things they were just saying were absolutely awful. And like, come on, this isn't even your home stadium, dude. You know what I mean? Like, what are you doing? Um, and yeah, I think if we hadn't had our girl there with us, and she was little, my husband probably would have said some choice words back, but he kept his cool. We kept ours, and yeah, yeah, it was not the best game, but luckily the Phillies won, so at least we had that. But yeah, I mean, you can get some tough crowds at these games, that's for sure. But I'm glad everything worked out okay
yes,
with you, and
and,
I guess
and
the
usually
I guess the
alcohol is
hat helped.
involved. Usually alcohol is involved in these
Well,
stories.
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. And a little fun rivalry is one thing. It's when it's getting violent that it's
Yes,
problematic.
I love
It's
rivalries,
like,
and I even love trash talk. But
yeah,
there's a real line you can cross,
yeah,
and most people
yeah,
know where the
yeah,
line is. Most people do
yes,
until they've had too much alcohol. Then there is no
yeah.
line.
I agree. That's fair. Yeah, yeah. It definitely is the alcohol that fuels a lot of that sort of violence
Yeah,
that you see
and the
sometimes with
liquid
crowds.
courage is what I would call it.
Yeah, indeed.
All
Yeah,
right, so
yeah.
this episode will be airing in the middle of December. So let's talk a little bit about Christmas, since Christmas will be coming up soon.
Yay!
So tell me,
Yeah.
do you have any memorable Christmas stories or Christmas memories from your childhood or even from your child's childhood?
Oh, wow. Oh, my little girl when she was, yeah. Oh my goodness. Yeah, we she's our only child. We just have one, and she's a great kid. I can't say enough about her, and she is sort of part of like she's adapted all of our Christmas traditions and enhanced and heightened them. One of the nice memories, and this goes all through her childhood and up until now, is that every year she has a bit of an artistic flair. So every year she draws our Christmas card. And this started when she was in second grade. It was the first Christmas after my dad, her pop-up, had passed away,
Mm,
sadly from yeah, he passed away from brain cancer,
wow.
in
Sorry to
his
hear
early
that.
60s. It was horrible, thank you. Yeah, it was terrible. It's been a long time now. This was Christmas of '06. He passed away in '06. So she was only 7 when she lost him, and she was close with him. So, we were like, let's try and do some special things. And so we were like, let's do a nice little card. Lauren can draw. That's my daughter. She can draw it. Just be something special. So that was kind of how it started. And then since then, she has drawn our card every single year.
Well,
So that's, I don't know, 17 or 18 different drawings now. And I have friends and stuff that say they wait for that card every year and they've collected them because they're so
that's
unique.
great.
And
That's a
they
great
are.
tradition.
They're really neat. And, she's almost 25. So now I'm like, how much longer can I expect her to draw this card? So I said, could we at least just get up to 20? Let's make it 20 cards, 20 years. And she was like, all right, because she really doesn't mind doing it. But it is funny that, you know, who would have thought that something we started when she was that started when she was 7 years old would continue up to this time. Um, so, that's just kind of a nice memory from every single year that's been consistent from year to year. Um, Gosh, I mean, so many good Christmas memories, but we're very big on traditions. Like when my husband and I were dating, there's a place near us it's like a little winter village, and we went to go visit on December 23rd, right? Which we used to call Christmas Eve Eve. Now people, sometimes now people, people now refer to it as Festivus because of Seinfeld. But whatever,
Well,
December
let
23rd.
me
So
stop you for just a second. What's the name of this Christmas village you mean? You went to? What?
oh, okay. So it's well, they do a Christmas village at Christmas, but they decorate seasonally. It's called Peddler's Village. It's in Bucks County.
Okay, because
Lovely place.
I've
I
been
mean,
to a Christmas village in Pennsylvania, and I was wondering if it was the same one. And
where were you at? Do you remember the
I
name?
don't remember. It's a whole village.
Okay.
It wasn't.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
Like, well, one near us that's on a farm, Shady Brook Farm. That's amazing. We go to that every year too, um, and they do a fantastic job. So, but this particular year, we went up to Peddler's Village on, like I said, December 23rd, and it was just. I know it sounds silly, but it just felt magical. Like it felt like we were so in that Christmas spirit at that moment, and so that's another thing we've adopted as a tradition. We go every year on December 23rd. A couple of times because of weather, we had to shift it a day or two. But yeah, we're just really big on like sort of these traditions that we do year after year. And then we always on Christmas Eve evening, we always watch Scrooge, the 1951 version of A Christmas Carol. That's our Christmas Eve tradition. So, just little things we've done year after year. Those are like, those are
Traditions are
fun.
great. I love traditions.
Yeah. Yeah. Same.
So does your daughter still participate now that she's almost 25 years old?
She does. Yeah. She's wonderful. And she is a huge Christmas fan. I'm the kind of person who I love Christmas when it is Christmas, but once it's not Christmas anymore, like, and I'll still sell, like, I'll leave our tree up throughout January. I'm good with that. But once we're like moving into a different season, I'm like, okay, I'm done with Christmas. And I'm not thinking about Christmas in August and September. Like to me, Christmas starts after Thanksgiving. But a lot of people like love Christmas music and Christmas culture, for lack of a better word, like all year round. She's like that. She could watch Christmas movies year round. She could watch or listen to Christmas music. Like she's a big fan of Home Alone, and like she's fine with doing that all the time. So yeah, she's pretty extra when it comes to Christmas, but
Extra. That's funny.
I like it in its time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree.
So
All right. So, what about New
yeah.
Year's? Do you have any New Year's resolutions that you've come up with that you're prepared to start on January 1st?
Ugh. Well, I always have a New Year's resolution to lose weight, which I never keep. um, you know what? I need to get back into reading books again. I spend so much of my time reading news.
Got a couple of books
And
suggestions for you.
yeah, that's right. That's right. I should start there. I need to get back into that. I've noticed that over the past 5 years or so, that so much of my reading and writing is focused on like what's going on in the world and all of that. And I'm like, gosh, I don't read as much fiction as I used to, or nonfiction even, that isn't necessarily related to what's going on right now. I used to be a really big fan of historical fiction, and still am. Just I've not been as good about just reading for pleasure as I used to be. So I would like to get back into that habit. I used to be reading 3 4 books at a time sometimes, and I've kind of lost that habit, so I'd like to
Same,
get back into
same
that. So
here. Yeah, I need to. Maybe
yeah.
that'll be my resolution. I hadn't thought about my own, but maybe that'll be mine to get back into like all. I'm pointing here like people can see it. The video will be available on YouTube, but I know most people listen to the podcast. But I'm pointing at books behind my head, and most of these books I haven't read yet. These are books I intend to read, but I haven't read yet. So
Oh
January
yeah.
1st would be a good opportunity to get started again. I'm talking. I'm
Yeah.
talking to myself right now. So
So no, but I so agree. I have books too that I've ordered because I was like, "Oh, that sounds great," and I just haven't dug into them yet. And so, yeah, I think that I need to get back into that. And I see your books up there too, so I think that's pretty cool. That's one thing I've never done. I've never written and published a book, and I'm so, um, you know, I'm just I don't want to say envious because that sounds negative, but I really am like I admire that you did that you went the full distance on that, and one day
yeah,
maybe I'll
I'm not sure I would
you
have
know
would have done it if it hadn't been for the COVID lockdown. Because I'd done
oh
research for
okay
30 years on my family without the intention of ever writing anything other than
right
stuff for my kids to have, so I can pass it on to
yeah
them to know
yeah
their family's history. But during the COVID lockdowns, I had lots of extra time, and so I thought might as well start writing, and so that's what I did, and I had enough information for 2 books. So I've written from both sides of my family's history, which go back in Texas to the Republic of Texas days back in the 1840s.
wow
So
that's
if
awesome.
you're a writer,
I give you
you,
a ton
you know
of
how to
credit.
put words together. It's just a matter of making yourself be disciplined enough to write every day, and
Disciplined.
that's the difference. You have to
Yep.
be consistent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that that's discipline is the key there. Every time I've started that, I've never maintained it. I like to think that eventually I'll get to a point where I will. But I think that if you keep putting things off like that and waiting for the perfect moment, it's just never going to come. There's always going to be something else that fills that space. So it's a matter of just saying, that's it. I'm going to do this,
Yeah, we don't want another
So,
worldwide pandemic to have to happen for you to sit down and.
no. Oh, please, no.
We don't need that. We don't need that.
No, yeah, no. Certainly not wishing for that,
No,
or any other worldwide calamity at this point. We definitely don't need that.
no, we don't. All right, so starting to wind down this interview. I want to give you some time to talk about anything you want to talk about that hasn't been brought up. Almost any topic, except for politics.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I don't want to talk about that anyway. Gosh, I don't know. Oh, I know, because we're both fans. What do you think of the new Beatles song? I love it.
I love the video. I
Do you?
don't
Yeah,
love the
same.
song. I like the song, but I don't
Really?
love the song.
Okay. All right.
And
Interesting.
it's it's just too slow for me. It's slow without really being a ballad. And
Okay.
obviously, when John recorded it, it was a demo situation, and he may have changed it somewhere
Sure.
along the way, and sped it up or whatever.
Right.
But the idea of it is beautiful. The technology required is fascinating. So everything around it
Yes.
is magical. I just
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wish it sounded like something from Abbey Road or Magical
Okay.
Mystery Tour album.
That's fair.
So it
Yeah.
sounds more
Yeah.
like early Beatles, which early Beatles were good too, but they weren't as good as the Beatles in the
The
late
later
'60s.
Beatles.
And
Oh, right. Same.
it's really crazy how we talk about early Beatles and late Beatles, but the entire catalog of Beatles history was 7 years.
7 or 8. Yeah. Yeah.
It
It's
was
crazy,
less
isn't
than a
it?
decade.
That's what I always say. When I talk about it with my daughter, who is also a Beatles fan, and I say to her, when you think about it, how prolific they were over that period. Essentially like 13 albums, like 4 films, like it's almost you can't fathom it because nowadays, the big artists generally will put out an album. It's every couple of years,
Yeah.
if you're lucky. Uh, the fact that they produced so much during that time, and I'm 100% with you. I prefer, the albums like 1966 and later over the stuff that's earlier than that. Although I love Rubber Soul, but I really, love Abbey Road. I love Let It Be, especially like when they released Let It Be Naked, the stripped down version.
Hmm.
Love it. And I always thought that that one was sort of underrated because it was sort of considered the breakup, album. But even though it really wasn't, but I agree. Yeah, the late 60s. And it's funny because my mom, who grew up in this area and went up to New York when the Beatles first were here in 1964 to see or to be on the Ed Sullivan show, and she stood outside their hotel and saw them waving, down
Wow.
at them. That's her Beatles. She loves the Mop Tops. She loves, She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand and Hard Day's Night and all of that. And she doesn't even know some of their later songs. She goes,
Really?
"Oh, well, by then I was married and had kids." Yeah. Like she knows Come Together and Let It Be and the basics, like the ones that were hits. But she doesn't. Sometimes I'll play a random song for her from the White Album or something, and she's like, I've never heard that song. I don't know that song." So it's crazy, right? Like she was actually around then.
That
I
is
wasn't even
crazy.
around.
It's
Yeah.
I'm a huge Beatles fan, and all trivia and all those things related to the Beatles. One of the things, another thing I find interesting when you try to compare eras, like Taylor Swift is the most popular artist in the world today, and when
Right.
she releases an album, her record company releases all 10 songs as singles, and so then when you talk
Yeah.
about artists who've had the most top 40 hits, it sort of gets distorted because like Taylor Swift may have 10 at one time, and the Beatles release
Right.
an album that's a masterpiece, and they released 2 singles from that album.
Exactly.
And yet,
That's
in that
right.
time period, 7 year time period, they had 60 hits, releasing two
Yeah.
or three album singles from albums. Imagine if they did it
It's
the way it is
amazing
now; they'd have 200
the
hit
way it is
top 40 hits.
now. No, you're absolutely right. And I've always thought too that some of their best stuff wasn't the stuff that became hits. Don't get me wrong, I love their hits. But some of their most interesting and fascinating stuff, they're like, hidden gems, that like just like I said with my mom, like doesn't even know those songs because by then she was married and had kids and wasn't paying as much attention to all that.
I can
And
relate.
so yeah, so yeah, but but like I don't know. I agree with you. I think it's comparing apples to oranges when you look at how music is today and how it was then. I mean, it's evolved and changed so much. Um, so yeah, the Beatles probably would have been even bigger than they already were if they were in this time frame.
Possibly, more than likely, but then
Imagine.
there could have been an oversaturation too, and people could have gotten tired of them.
True.
So you
That's
just never
true.
know. You never know.
No,
Their
you don't.
legacy is at the top, and it should always stay there. I don't care who else comes
I'm
along.
with
I
you
don't care
100%
how
on that.
far into the future it is. One last Beatles related song I want to, or Beatles related memory I want to share. Um,
Yeah.
my oldest daughter is also a huge Beatles fan, and Paul McCartney came to Texas last year, and she
Hmm.
bought tickets for the two of us to go. So
Nice.
they played. He played in Fort Worth, and we lived down. I lived near San Antonio, and we drove up there and went to the show, and it was awesome. He was just a couple months away from turning 80 last year at the show.
It's
He
crazy.
played 40 songs, no break, no intermission, no opening act. He
Unbelievable.
did all the song, all the singing. He played 6 or 7 different instruments on stage with his band. It was a great performance, whether he was 80 or
Wow.
30. It was pretty incredible.
Yeah. That's amazing. How nice. That's great. I haven't seen Paul since '93. I saw him at Veterans Stadium back then, um, which was fantastic. It was great then, but it's been a long time. It's been 30 years. It's crazy to me. But my daughter and I, and my husband went with us too. He's not really a Beatles fan, but he he respects them. Let's put it that way for their impact, right? Even though it's not really his favorite kind of music. So he went with us. We went to see Ringo and his all star band. I want to say that was probably about 7 years ago, maybe here in Philly. We saw them. They were fantastic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing these guys at their ages. How I mean, I'm like amazed at how like they're still so. And it's not just them; it's like other rock stars too that are still going, and they still seem to have so much energy. And I'm just
Yeah,
so
I'm
impressed
I'm a
by them.
lot younger than that, and I don't have that kind of energy. I mowed my grass 2 days
Yeah.
ago, and I'm still sore.
I know. I know. I feel the same way. I'm like, God bless them, you know?
Yeah,
So,
role
yeah,
models. They're role models for us.
they sure are. Yep.
Another New
Yep.
Year's resolution: get in shape.
Yeah,
I'm
there you
talking to myself again.
go. Yep.
All right,
Adding that one to the list.
I've enjoyed this conversation, Melissa. I appreciate you joining us. So Melissa Amor has been our
Too.
guest today and joining us for her storytelling journey. And Melissa, I hope you have and your family have a wonderful Christmas time. So to keep it on the Paul McCartney theme.
Hey, thank you, Melvin. You too. And it would be so nice if we could celebrate that war is over, wouldn't it?
Yes,
And this Christmas.
nice transition there. I
Yeah,
appreciate that. Good
keeping with that
segue.
with that theme. Yeah,
So
yeah. But you too, thank you so much for having me on and wishing you guys too a wonderful holiday season.
thank you. Appreciate it. So that's it for today's episode of Real Life and Other Fantasies. Join us again next time for another great storytelling journey. Until then, don't forget to shine some light wherever you go.